Hello and welcome back to another episode of Talking Tent, a RaceSpotTV podcast. Thank you for joining us, either live across RaceSpot's YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, or Twitch, or through the audio version released the very same day through a podcast app of your preference. As always, my name is Arjuna Kankipati, and I am joined by veteran esports commentator Connery Maddock, with our producer Hugo Luis down in the production booth controlling the action. And Connery, we're back after a week off. We had the VCO Pro Sim series last Wednesday that conflicted with our podcast recording slot, but one more episode to go before the end of the year. We're starting to head towards the winter break now, and usually in the real world that thing means that things start to quiet down, but in the sim world things are always exciting, and we're going to dive right into it. Porsche Esports Super Cup qualifying done and dusted, and we're just about 4 weeks away now from the start of a new World Championship season.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a funny thing when the real-life racing goes into its off-season. That's when sim racing starts to come to the forefront, because we've got those endurance racing seasons, and of course, you know, we have the start of the Porsche Tagoya Esports Super Cup for 2021 at the very, very start of the year. So a little bit of a change in the dates when it comes to the period where the World Championship takes place. But yeah, we have our grid set now, and we actually had to wait for a little bit of confirmation after that final round out here due to a little bit of drama.
Yeah, hashtags Williamsgate, as Craig Williams put it himself. But let's dive right into it then. Let's talk about the 20 drivers who have locked themselves in. And, well, the most impressive name for me was Charlie Collins, who started off the 5-week qualifying season competing for SimRC.de, but at the conclusion of 5 weeks, no longer driving for the German outfit, now representing the very famous purple and orange of Coanda Simsport. And well, Connery, now we're looking at about a quarter of next year's grid representing the purple and orange in some form. There are some regulations in the Porsche Super Cup about team affiliations, but I mean, if you are that team, Coanda Simsport, you've got so many big names now. You've got Dane Warren, who joined up last year as well. I mean, a quarter of the grid. If you are that team, you are very looking forward to this next season of competition and the chance to reclaim a World Championship title.
Yeah, absolutely. Coming into that is going to be perhaps one of, if not the most competitive World Championships that we ever had. I would say that the 2020 season was the most competitive World Championship we've ever had, but it seems like as the years roll by here in the Porsche Tagoya Esports Super Cup, it looks like things just keep getting closer and closer and closer, and that's what we absolutely love to see. We don't want to see just a couple of drivers trying to fight it out for the championship. Everyone up and down the field, we want to see them come to the forefront and have their chance at one of the biggest prizes in sim racing. And you know, the reason why this championship is so great is that everyone is so close. Everyone, you know, from pole position down to 40th is within a couple of tenths of a second, and I don't think there's any other series that you get that sort of closeness.
Well, and it's top of the ladder of road racing, and one thing that I think was interesting looking over the names, it's not just some new faces. You do have a few returning drivers. You've got Brian Lockwood, Thomas Tattler, Jack Sedgwick, three of the names that spring to mind. But one name that I really found interesting, leading the charge for Williams Esports, Moreno Sorica. And you had the opportunity last year to commentate on him in the Porsche Esports Sprint Challenge. And that support series has really helped, I think, a number of drivers get used to the ins and outs of World Championship competition and really prepared them for this qualifying series and to jump in to the top ladder of the World Championships. There you can see up on your screen, if you're watching live, the 20 drivers that have qualified, and it's a star-studded lineup there, Connery.
Yeah, absolutely, and this is why I keep saying that this season is just going to be so strong and so competitive, because you have all these new qualifiers coming in, you know, very competitive drivers like you mentioned. Moreno Sorica, very, very solid driver. Charlie Collins, obviously, you've mentioned him as well, winning out the season completely thanks to a good first 3 rounds. Last 2 didn't quite go his way, but as long as he got those podiums and those race wins early on in the season, there was no looking back for him. More Finnish representation in the form of Thomas Tattler, and we got a good representation in terms of countries, and we actually get an additional 2 Spanish drivers as well, Ricardo Rico and Carlos Fenolosa, joining Alejandro Sanchez for next season as well. So it looks like Spanish sim racing is continuing on its meteoric rise.
And don't forget Sanchez's teammate Salva Talons as well for MSI Esports, obviously in that partnership with the Apex Racing team, another driver for the ART outfit that qualified. Zach Campbell in 8th place, who won the first of our Super Session qualifying races. A bit more of a difficult run in the next 4 outings. Let's also take a look then at your 20 locked-in drivers from last year, and obviously leading the charge, last year's champion, Sebastian Joby. Look through the rest of that list though, Connery, and there's where you start to see the flood of Coanda drivers filling that page, both left and right-hand side of your screens as well.
Look, I think in the last podcast I already gave my thoughts when it comes to this sort of situation. And we had quite a lengthy chat after the podcast about that as well, to see if there was anything iRacing could do to try and make this seem a little bit less ridiculous. Of course, it's well within the rules, what Coanda are doing. It's, there's nothing against it. It just, it doesn't look quite as good from the outside if, a good massive chunk of the grid is all from the same team, even though they are technically separate teams because of the 4 driver per quote-unquote team regulation.
Well, I tell you what, Connor, we got one more show to go this year, and I'm kind of thinking that will be our recap/prediction year, but we're taking a look then at these 20 drivers locked in from last year. I'm going to put you on the spot. Who is going to come in next year, just 4 weeks away from round number 1, and win the next championship? You got Job and Rogers, the only 2 previous champions in Porsche World Championship competition history. Is it going to be one of the new drivers, or are those 2 drivers who have been so consistent over the last 2 years really going to continue to step up and dominate?
Look, if I wanted to be safe, I would say that Seb has a very good chance at reclaiming his title. I will say that. He's an incredible driver, incredibly clean driver as well. Just keeps himself out of trouble. And that's what Joshua Rogers failed to do this season. He failed to keep himself out of trouble. And sometimes the trouble was always coming his way in some aspects. It's not that he got himself into those problematic situations. But I think Seb does have a fantastic chance at, doing the double as far as next season is concerned. But saying that, Joshua Rogers, he might be coming back into this one and looking for some sort of revenge, some sort of comeback after what was a terrible season. So certainly that is a possibility. As far as new drivers, though, or as far as drivers that we haven't been talking much that are in the conversation, I think if we see another year-on-year improvement from Alejandro Sanchez coming into next season, then he'll certainly be up there trying to fight it out for the championship. But as far as any of the new guys, I don't see any of them challenging for the championship. Maybe at least top 5, but not for championship.
So there's Connery Maddox predictions. I'm going to go bold here. You know what? I think Maximilian Benecke, he's had a bit of a torrid 2020 across the board. Let's see if 2021 is going to be his year for the German driver, Mr. 10K Benecke, as we used to call him. I just did want to call out as well, Connery. I'm looking at the qualifying result standings right now. A few drivers who I think are a bit unlucky to miss out here on qualification. So in 21st place, 2 points behind 20th place Fenelosa, Danny Elgerbe, who had to miss out on the last qualifying race because of some brake issues. You had Luis Felipe Tavares, who was running second in that final race before an incident dropped him down the order. Same with Pete Berryman, who, after winning last year's qualifying series, being ineligible for the World Championship, has come back again trying to qualify and has had a pretty torrid run of luck, as it were. Phil Dinez as well in 25th place, made every single one of our 5 Super Session races and unable to get the results that was needed. And Connery, let's quickly talk about the format here, because 5 races and 5 opportunities to get qualifying points, but the slight mix-up this time around where not everyone is guaranteed those points. You've got to qualify up into the Super Sessions and then get the results that you needed, and that really made for a very interesting dynamic throughout the qualifying process.
Yeah, it's an incredibly different element, isn't it? Because usually how things worked before, you would just have to have a high enough I rating to get into the top splits, no matter where you got that I rating in the first place. But with this sort of system, you see those specialists in the car able to, well, have a better chance at getting themselves into that Super Session and being able to grab those points. So it's not so reliant on iRating. Of course, you have to do those races during the week leading up to the Super Session, and there's all that situation, but it still gives a better chance for maybe some names we didn't expect to see. But I think the system's pretty good. I think everything needed to change compared to the previous ways the qualifying series used to work, where, like I said, it was basically treated like a normal race, a normal iRacing official series. The drivers would negotiate amongst themselves, which time slot during the week is going to be the strength of field session, and of course that might be in conjunction with the broadcasters as well. But that was open to abuse, and we saw some abuse of it during the last Pro Series when some drivers were sort of collude together, teammates, to be able to make their own strength of field session and just grab a load of championship points that way. I think this way is a lot less open to abuse, and I want to see it used for the years to come as well.
Yeah, and I think it was also interesting that they were trialing this new penalty system at the same time, and Greg West was every week giving updates about that. So we'll see how that plays out for our next World Championship season. Then rumors circulating that they're going to bring that penalty system over into the main World Championship. I think that was a bit of a recap then of 5 weeks of action. Let's jump into our main topic of today and bring in our guest, Martin Ascher. Some of you will know him from his company, Ascher Racing, that makes some of the highest quality steering wheels out there on the market. Martin has been part of the sim racing hardware community for going on about 7 years at this point, and is a person that is reclusive in some ways, doesn't have a public social media, has made it very difficult for us to kind of interview him for this interview, but delighted to be able to talk to him because he's not just a hardware creator, he's also a racer, and we are all passionate about racing, and it'll be great to talk to him a little bit about that. So Martin, delighted to have you on the show, and it's been a very interesting 2020, and I'm sure for someone like you, it has been one of the more hectic years of your life.
Hi guys, thanks for having me. Obviously you could find me, and that's I didn't want to make it too challenging for you, but you managed it. This year was really intense for sim racing in general. First, sim racing got one of the biggest boosts it could ever imagine. On the other side, hardware was in demand like never before, and top of that with some supply changes were broken down, and it was a really difficult time, but in the end it was a great year for sim racing in general, I would say.
And so, like I said, Martin, people might not know that you like to race as well, because I'm sure you're very busy designing and getting the production of the hardware out there, but it's been great to see you competing regularly in the DNLS series that VCO has been putting on. Talk to us a little bit about that and your experiences competing in that series. It's a interesting series. You got the real series organization coming over, bringing that into the virtual world, and it seems like something that you've had a decent amount of success in as well.
The DNLS was created very in a short time frame. So all the COVID-19 stuff canceled the real motorsports, and then real racing had to get some alternatives, and they made a very successful launch, I would say. The DNLS managed to get most of the real racers to race in the simulator. Some of them were very new to all of this. Some were already experienced sim racers. And for me or for my team or for us, it was a pretty easy decision to take part. If we managed the qualifying, which we did in the end. And we had some awesome races against big names from the real racing and from the simulator world. So it's really nice to do this.
And I'm sure some of those, at least some of those drivers competing on hardware that you had designed as well. But let's jump back then to the start of this entire journey. Let's not start with your beginning into the hardware design of things. Let's start with your love of sim racing. Do you remember the first time you got to try out a sim title and you got invested in it and you felt like this was one of your passions?
I can think about it. So the very first time I got behind a sim racing wheel was actually in the late 90s. I think it was like 97 or 98, when one of my friends' dad had a Microsoft Sidewinder for feedback wheel, and it was for me like I couldn't imagine what we are doing. So it was not a sim racing title, just a regular game, but I couldn't believe what I'm doing. So, and then I didn't have computer or good enough computer or the hardware, and that was about it. But then in maybe 2001, I guess, I got some entry-level hardware, and I raced the F1 titles quite a lot. So in Germany, Formula One was very, very popular with Michael Schumacher, and I watched every race. And then I got behind my game and raced every week the same track before the real races, and got really into it. But in the end, I lost track about it for quite some time, I would say. Finished school, studying and stuff like that. But at the end of my study at the university, I felt the need to get racing again somehow. I don't know where it comes from, but then I started Googling what's out there, and I found iRacing, and all that I could find about iRacing was exactly what I wanted. So I signed up. I think it was 2012, I guess. And then I bought some other entry gear and started racing. And up until now, I'm continuously racing and against real people around the world.
Well, I'm guessing that you've things have changed since you started in iRacing as well. But let's talk a little bit about your studies, because I think there's talking to some other wheel designers and manufacturers of sim racing hardware. They don't always get their start in the type of situations that you might think of. So let's start with your background. What was your degree at the university level, and what was your immediate career path looking like when you came out of that?
I was studying aeronautical engineering at the Fachhochschule. That's some kind of university in Munich. And actually, I finished my degree. It was a diploma. But I was at that point maybe 22 years old, I think. And I didn't want to start working immediately, and I found out about Formula Student actually, and then I switched to the TU Munich. They have a very professional Formula Student team, and I signed up for a mechanical engineering degree, but my focus was to take part in Formula Student full time. So I ended up there for 2 years, and we designed cars and took part in championships around the world. And actually, in Formula Student, I learned at least as much as in my study before. So we were making concepts, we designed stuff, we tested stuff, we destroyed stuff, we improved stuff. We worked really, really hard, and yeah, and in the end, we actually did some racing as well. I had the opportunity to race the cars in the championships, and for me, it was like I had no experience at all. The closest to a race car was, I would say, a rental car. And then I jumped into the Formula Student race car. It has slick tires, it has downforce, and I couldn't believe what these cars are capable of. So that's where I signed up with iRacing as well. Yeah, and I did Formula Student for 2 years. And after that, I started my own company, actually.
Oh wow, so straight out of your university degree, you came out of that got involved in the sim racing hardware world, and that's when Ascher Racing itself got its start.
Correct. At the beginning, the market was not really great, like really big, I would say, and I was working part-time for another company with my mechanical engineering background. We were making some frequency calculations for Porsche, but it took only half a year where I realized I need all my time for my own company and continue in that path.
Well, so let's jump back a little bit as well, because we were just talking about this before we went on there. You had a history with sim racing that starts in terms of the hardware before your company itself, because the direct drive market is something that really over the last few years has really exploded in terms of, you know, mainstream manufacturers coming on board as well. But you were one of the very first people, it turns out, to build a direct drive wheel and be part of that growing community that designed, in many ways, the direct drive foundation for, at least on the Simucube side of thing, right? Because obviously everything that was developed as part of the original OSW has all been incorporated into the current day Simucube 2.
Yeah, correct. So direct drive changed everything. It made actually me starting the company because of the need for steering wheels, but it was like that. I was doing or racing at iRacing for 1 or 2 years, and then in our German forum there was a guy, it was Bernhard Berger, and he made a forum post. It was just like, hey guys, I found a way to build a direct drive wheel by yourself, really inexpensive compared to what's on the market today. And I found this servo drive from Granite Devices. It has a CPU which I can run my own code. And here I got this servo motor from China. And all you need to do is some stuff. And he described it very vaguely, I would say. And I saw this post, and for me it was clear I need to do this. So I was one of the first guys really getting into it and bought all the components which he described we need, and worked with Bernhard close together for the firmware side. So I was testing, he was the developer, and that's where everything started, I would say. In the end, about half a year later, I wrote the Open SimWheel tutorial to get other guys an easy start for building their own stuff, and more people got hooked about it. So today I think the sim racing hardware transformed the market as much as on the software side or on the broadcasting side, or everything is working together to make a better experience.
I think you said something important there, which was that it was honestly the direct drive that changed the market. Because Connery, I'm going to ask you a question here. I know you don't race, and you don't have the highest end gear. What's your current?
I don't.
What's your current
race.
Well, okay, you're more like me. You commentate more than you race. But I'll ask the question: what's your current daily driver in terms of your rig, and what's the most high-end rig that you've had the opportunity to try at something like a sim racing expo?
Yeah, I mean, I own 2 wheels at the moment, but they're both like the basic consumer wheels. So I got a Logitech G920 on my desk right now. I've got a First Master T150 somewhere down there, and it's yeah, I mean, both have served me fine, but I have been able to try the well, much more premium equipment, shall we say, at things like the Sim Racing Expo, and I gotta say there is an absolute night and day difference, not just in the wheels but also in the pedals as well. And if I could justify, if I raced enough and at top level enough to be able to justify the investment, I would definitely go for it. But right now, for me at least, talking about the sim racing sort of takes precedence over doing the sim racing at the moment. But I gotta say, you know, the leaps and bounds that a lot of the sim racing gear manufacturers have made over the past couple of years is absolutely incredible. Because I remember a time, you know, when I first started getting involved in sim racing, that was around about 2012 or so, like starting to get seriously involved in sim racing. Of course, I've played racing games before that. You know, the best you could get was like some of the Fanatec equipment and like a T500 or something like that. The concept of direct drive wheels was still like a quite a foreign concept to many people, but now it's just if you're a top sim racer, you kind of have to have one.
Yeah, the good thing is you can be fast with low-end equipment as well, so nobody needs to have it for getting some additional speed. So if you're quick with the direct drive wheel or without one, but it's much more enjoyable and realistic. And actually, I think it's easier with a direct drive wheel to race.
Oh,
Yeah,
for sure.
I think
sure it's
some
easier.
drivers, yeah, sorry to interrupt, but I think most drivers just feel it's less that you get quicker, it's more that you are more consistent and are more in tune with what the car is actually doing. So that's a little benefit in its own way, I suppose.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I've been on like an interesting path myself. I started with a G27. I went up to a Fanatec CSW. Then I got a Simucube 1. Then I got a Simucube 2. So I've been, fortunate to be able to try all of these different levels. And the one thing that you realize is that G27 to a CSW is a huge leap, right? You go from belt gear driven to belt driven. I think I got that the right way around. And you can start feeling things. But then when you take the next step up from your $500 wheel, let's say, to the next step, which is Simucube 1, even that was a huge step for me. And then I found the Simucube 2 was an equal step up in terms of that. So it's been really cool to see the continual evolution on the wheelbase side of things, but there's also evolution on the what you actually control, right? The wheelbase is what gives you the force feedback, but the tactile input is ultimately what gets served by the wheel rim itself. And one thing I told you right when we started as well, Martin, is comparing what is a 600, 700 euro wheel rim in your F28 wireless Simucube wheel to a much more expensive wheel that I have, which is the Precision Sim Engineering GPX, which is about 6 or 7 times the price. It's very interesting that what started as a one-man shop in your operation is now a much bigger show and a much more involved manufacturing process. And as a result, the wheels that you're now producing are, like I was telling to you, just as good as the much more expensive wheels. And at that point, the margin of, diminishing returns is so much harsher, and that's what makes your wheels such a good value. And there's been so much development work that you've been putting in since you started as well. Can you talk to us a little bit about your process and how your racing experience and how what you want while you're driving, corresponds to then how you come back and sit down and design some of these wheels?
Yeah, obviously I'm the first beta tester of my products, always this by myself, and I try to get as much feedback as I can from customers or testers, but ultimately I get the best ideas for new products or improvements when I'm racing my stuff by myself. Be it tactile feedback, ergonomics, or actually what kind of controls do you want, what makes sense, be it a joystick or double clutch or whatever. I'm a racer, and that's where I get my best ideas from.
And so talk to us about some of these challenges, right? So you started as a one-man show. Were you soldering all of these components at this point in time? You were using, I guess, Leo Bodner circuit board. Just talk to us about the early days, and then we'll make a transition to where you are now.
Yeah, I started as a one-man show, and I made everything by myself. So actually it started, I even built my own CNC router to cut the parts by myself, the carbon fiber parts, the plastic parts or whatever. And having the engineering background and the experience from, let's say, Formula student, kind of lowered for me the bar to do new stuff. Or I have never built a CNC router before, but I was not afraid of doing the research and on building it. So I had no big financial background, so I couldn't invest a lot of money. I had very little money to begin with, and I was growing organically. So I took all the earnings and reinvested them all the time for years, and now I can make use of much more expensive production processes.
And no longer a one-man shop anymore, right? This is something that we can talk about the year that 2020 has been, but we're just talking about your stock situation and what a interesting topic that's been for many people to follow along in 2020. But you now have a team behind you. You're able to outsource, I guess, some of this manufacturing side of thing, and able to focus your attention on growing the company, developing products and all the stuff that you couldn't do when you're spending all that time one by one and individually building these wheels.
Yeah, exactly. So everything turned out that I cannot serve the demand for my products by myself, and hiring people for assembly and stuff like that was not the best solution because it involves so much effort in the background. But I had the great opportunity to team up with my new partner. It's KW Suspension. It's kind of a very big and famous German company building race car suspensions and automotive suspensions and all kind of stuff. And they used to be my customer. They are involved in sim racing, and they approached me and very open-minded asked how we can work together and accelerate the process of making sim racing products and making better products in the end. And I took the opportunity, and now we are working together. KW is making the distribution of the product and the manufacturing of the products, and we can take advantage of all their resources, and I can focus on the development side. And that's what I want to do as an engineer. And for years I made everything, like assembling the stuff, soldering the stuff, selling it, packaging it, shipping it, making the support, and it wasn't possible to keep up with everything. And now KW is my perfect partner for that. They are deeply involved in sim racing. For KW, part of them is Race Room, the simulation side and the hardware side. And another brand of KW is Track Time. They are building motion simulators. Yeah.
Well, I guess as well, it's very much like being a developer, right? We love to solve the problems and to write code, but we don't like to sit there and do the business side of things. We want to get, stuck in, hands-on. And I think, Connery, I can see you peeking up there.
Well, I'm kind of a little different when it comes to that, though. Because obviously, for those that don't know, both myself and we went to university for computer science. You work as a software developer in the day, and obviously I'm just coming off the back of finishing my degree, and obviously into this whole pandemic. Kind of not doing much of anything right now, but yeah, I mean, it's different in terms of personality-wise, especially when it comes to STEM based things. Some of them would want to work on just creating something and building something, and obviously which is what your situation is, with not wanting to do any of the business side. But I think the business side is also kind of its own little, you can have a little bit of enjoyment with it unless you really, 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 really hate the bureaucracy of it.
I got told very early on in my career that you always want to get up into management until you end up in management, and then you want to end up doing all the coding. So I guess it depends on the type of person you are. But Martin, let's talk about this partnership with KW, but let's talk about it from the perspective of 2020, right? Because you launched a whole new suite of products at the end of last year. And I can actually hold one of them up right now. I've got one. We've got the F28 wireless wheel right here, and this was part of a brand new suite of things. Simucube 2 introduced wireless functionality. You released the wheel that supported that. You released a whole range of button boxes as well. You had a additional USB-based wheel as well. But there was always a bit of trouble keeping that in stock, and I'm guessing that 2020 and all of the supply chain issues that were caused in, between February and maybe April or May really made it difficult for you as an individual to keep up supply of your wheels. And I'm guessing KW, with all of their resources, like you just mentioned, made it much more possible for 2020 to be a year where you could deliver these wheels to your customers.
Yeah, correct. But it takes a little bit of time for such a partnership to get the output that you wanted. So it's a long process to implement, but this is just starting right now, where we can actually scale up the production as much as what is needed. And that's why I ran out of stock for a really, really long time this year. So when I sold my last batch, it was like May. The pandemic increased the demand, and then the supply chain had some issues. So the biggest effect of the supply chain were some electronic components. So it was just a few components that were the bottleneck. But I heard that private individuals were hoarding toilet paper, and manufacturing companies were hoarding electronic components, and we had really, really long lead time for some of them. For example, the F64 is still affected from that, but all the other wheels are back in stock now, and we try our best, and I hope, or I'm confident that we can manage it, that we don't run out of stock anymore.
Well, and I think that's something that we were going to have a bit more of a roundtable discussion about sim racing hardware at the end of this, but one thing that I think even the bigger companies like the Fanatics, the Thrustmarters, they sometimes have this issue, just like the smaller boutique dealers do have, which is stock, right? Sim racing is such a niche business. How much do you want to keep on the shelves ready to go versus how much do you build to order, which is obviously, in the case of the high-end custom wheels, a much more realistic and frequent proposition. But I'm guessing the prospect of having continuous stock is something that this is something that you can finally do for the first time in, I guess, 6 years of selling sim racing hardware.
Yeah, if you have your glass bowl where you can look into the future, this would not be a problem. So everybody would order parts in advance. But yeah, it's really, really difficult to estimate the correct amount of demand, and having always enough stock to keep up with it, but not too much that if you maybe develop something new, then you have the old stuff still in stock, and it's a quite difficult balance, I would say. But you also don't want to make too big of investments and make having lots of risk take. So it's really difficult, but much more as a one-man show compared to a big company.
Well, I am curious, Martin, what is your personal rig situation? We see you sitting, I think, in your simulator right now. You got a Simucube wheelbase, I'm hoping. You've got some nice hoisting belt pedals, potentially?
Yeah, correct. That's absolutely correct. So here is my, I don't know if you can see it, my Simucube Ultimate, hoisting felt pedals in the background. And yeah, it's a rig which I've built by myself as per my needs. So it's a aluminium profile rig, and I tried to build it as tidy and neat as possible. Easy to clean, it's on rolls, and it's the first time for many, many years where I'm quite happy and don't plan any upgrades soon.
Oh, well, you said that. I'm sure you've got something planned. I do have a question, though. Are you sitting in a Tillette seat? Because that looks like a very nice seat that you've got right there.
Yeah, it's I think Tillet B3. I
Okay.
don't know. Is it?
Yes. So
Yeah,
that's like more a GT style seat, right?
Exactly. So I used to have a Tillet before because I was racing a lot of Formula cars, and I always tried to build something that comes close to my Formula student experience. But I gave up the idea, and I'm really comfortable with the GT style position, because you have to make sure that the field of view of your monitor is perfect, and then you have to make the decision: do I put the monitor behind the wheelbase or in front of it? And if you have a really large wheelbase, the SimuCube 2 is one of the smaller ones. But then if you're in a laying position, your monitor is too far upwards, and you can solve it with virtual reality. Obviously, it's I think that's definitely the future, but they have to be a little bit more comfortable to where that I want to do 4-hour races in virtual reality. So
Yeah, especially for you, you do the DNLS races solo, so I'm sure that comfort is a very important thing.
yeah, so there's nothing that can beat virtual reality immersion-wise. It's like the best experience you can ever get. But you have to make some compromises. And yeah, when I was racing virtual reality for a really long time, the resolution was always on the lower side, but I was happy with it. But right now I switched back to the monitor. I'm still convinced that virtual reality is the future, but as you mentioned, sometimes I'm doing 4-hour races solo, and I want to test my products, and I need to see them get a better understanding of everything, and I may be switching back to virtual reality at some point in the future, though.
Well, I am hearing good things about the new Reverb G2, so maybe that's something where we get a little bit more in terms of the resolution, right?
Yeah, maybe I will get one and think about it again.
Yeah, because I thankfully have recently finally had the opportunity to try VR, because my partner does actually have a HTC Vive, and that was pretty awesome. I gotta say, for first experience, it kind of made me think. It's just like, oh, imagine if I had like a direct trophy. Imagine if I had like Heisenfeld Pals, because otherwise, because that would have been, so much more of an immersive experience. But yeah, I definitely agree that virtual reality is the future of sim racing. Of course, a lot of the top level drivers at the moment still on the triple screens, because it's virtual reality. It's not quite there, not quite there just yet. But I think in the next generation, of headsets coming out, I mean, you can even say the Oculus Quest, for example, is the Valve Index one. There we go. Valve Index is pretty much there. As far as that's concerned. So, the next headsets from Oculus and some such, are all going to be capable of solving the resolution problem, solving the refresh rate and delay and things like that. It's just a case of we all have to upgrade our PCs now, I guess.
Yeah, we all need 30 series NVIDIA GPUs, Hugo. Just a word. I'll send you my shipping address after this. But let's move on to something slightly different, Martin. We've talked a lot about the physical hardware itself, but one thing that has always impressed me about boutique sim racing manufacturers, it's not unique to you, and I know this is an interview with you, but I do want to shout out the rest of the smaller sim racing community, the hardware community as well, but customer support. I don't know why. I'm going to refrain from naming names, but sometimes at bigger companies it tends to be less personal, less of a actual customer service type of a feel. Whereas whenever I reach out to one of these smaller companies, it always feels like I'm part of the family, and you are trying to help me figure out the situation in the best way possible, the quickest way that will also save us all the most time and money. Just talk to us a little bit about that and the experience of doing customer service at the same time as building the wheels. And I'm sure now with all of the partnerships, you're able to start offloading that to more dedicated representatives for the company.
Yeah, so the best, my goal was always the best customer service is the one that you don't need. But that's quite a unreachable goal, I would say. So being the sim racer by myself, and I can perfectly understand my customers, and I got fed up when I want to race an important race and my gears breaking down. So I made the goal personally for myself, and now with the KW partnership as well, that customer service is number one. So if there is a problem, we fix it as quick and as easy as possible. And I don't know, it's just the logic thing for me to do, I think.
Well, I think the thing that's important, right, is especially in these type of companies, right, people are spending a lot of money. Often, like in the early days, they have to wait for the product as well because it was built to order. That just the more helpful feeling, right, that even if the customer service was needed, in the unlikely case, you're always there, prompt replies, you're not trying to blame the customer for anything. Just a few basic understandings to try and make the customer's experience as pleasant as possible. I've only had to contact you once, and well, that was, as we call in the software world, PEBCAC. User exists between the user and the keyboard. In this case, it was my brain. I had the battery the wrong way around in my wireless wheel. So, I mean, when you get small issues like that, sometimes as a developer myself, I get a little frustrated at times when I get support issues. But I think it's always been important to a company like yours that every time someone talks about it on the forum, there's that positive word of mouth. Because like you said, most of the company's growth has been organic and driven in a lot of ways through the iRacing forum.
Yeah, I think it's something can go wrong anytime. So no matter how hard you try, but at least if you try to learn from every single mistake and take measures to avoid them in the future, then you're getting constantly closer to not having the need for customer support. We all know it's not going to happen, but I try to learn from every single mistake and improve the product constantly.
Well, I tell you what, Martin, let's break it off now into a slightly more different discussion. We've talked a lot about your background to this point, but let's talk a little bit more broadly about sim racing hardware and what it can do to continue evolving, right? Because we're in the stage now where, like you say, VR is going to be the future. And as a designer of sim racing wheels, I'm sure that poses different problems, right? No longer do you have the issue of users wanting LEDs maybe or things like that, but instead the difficulty becomes ensuring that the wheel layout is simple enough that users can remember, they find the right button 100% of the times, and just different challenges start to arise in the design process.
Yeah, I think the future of sim racing, we got a taste of it this year. So the real racing and the simulator world is getting closer, I think. So you see some real racers jumping in the simulator. We see simulator racers getting in the real world. Now, you used to start your racing career with karting. Nowadays you can just prove yourself online. Being one of the best sim racers gets you the opportunity for real drive, and I think the same is going to happen with the hardware. So some of my parts are used in real racing for quite some time. For example, the pedal shifters or stuff like that, and it's like merging together, I think.
So wait, your paddle shifters are actually used in real cars?
Yeah. sure.
That's awesome.
That is really, really cool, actually. But I guess it's a matter of time before the whole wheel assembly becomes, just stick it on the steering column of a real race car and call it a day, right?
To be honest, I can see that happening. So we obviously have some small differences with you don't have a USB in the car, but you have other types of electronics. But I think we are getting closer where eventually you can almost take the same wheel from the simulator to the real car. I think there will always be two versions of it, but only some minor differences, and you can, as a real racer, race the similar or exact same wheel in your simulator to train. Or if you're an enthusiast, you always want to have the real gear, and you're really, really close to it, actually. And what I saw in the real racing world, sometimes the simulator components are even better than the real ones.
But I guess in some ways, right, sim racing hardware has to have a longer lifespan, right? Because if you're a racing team, the costs are already so exponentially high that if you need to replace a steering wheel after 6 races, it is what it is. But if you need to replace your steering wheel every 6 sim races, that's going to start adding up, you know what I mean? So the components in there, especially like, for example, your shifters, Martin, in terms of testing, can you quickly talk to us about your testing philosophy? Because I'm sure you have automated testing that helps validate a lot of your components. What does that look like for you in the sim racing world?
So designing my products is obviously some kind of evolutionary process. So I learn from every product that I design and from every issue that I'm experiencing. I try to find the source of the issue and make sure that it doesn't happen again. And for the pedal shifters, I simply made a test rig and let it run to no end and see what happens. And I can say for sure that the pedal shifter, you will going to have a really hard time to get to the end of the physical capabilities, like destroying the switch, which is rated, I believe it was 2 million cycles, but that's only the lower end if you use the switch with a high electric load. So obviously anything can break at any time, but you can make sure that most of the stuff simply cannot happen. And for the pedal shifters, yeah, I have a test rig, and I stopped testing at some point because it didn't make sense to run it. It was a really loud experience in my workshop, and I stopped it after 2 or 3 million cycles.
Oh man, that sounds like a long couple of hours as well of listening to the tick 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 of the shifters going back and forth.
Yeah.
Connery, I thought you had something to say. You looked ready to say something.
Nah. I have my wheel on my desk, and I was just like, I was just clicking the shifters because you said. But obviously, with my microphone, you can't hear anything because it's meant to be noise cancelling. But yeah, it's great to see, at least you did that initial portion, and then it was just like, well, we've gone through all this rigorous testing, and they still haven't broken yet, so might as well get them out the door, so to speak. What are you doing now, Yuna? You got your wheel.
Yeah, no, I'm just examining the very delightful F28 SE, the wireless Simucube wheel that Martin has. You can see here the Simucube wireless logo, and I'm just having a little bit of a click here. I think you guys can hear that through the microphone, can't you?
Yes.
It is a very tactile shifting feeling. Like this, I was saying it earlier, Martin, but this really is, in many ways, a direct competitor to a wheel that costs about 6 times as much. And that really is one of the highest praises that you can give to any product, I think, is comparing it to a much more expensive version of a similar thing. So I'm just enjoying this very much right now.
Yeah, good to hear that. I hope it doesn't end with the F28 SC from your wheel collection.
He's
Well,
trying to get you to buy more, are you?
I know it's leading in perfectly to my next question, which is I asked you about what you think the future of design is going to be, but for you and the company itself, you've now been freed up, I guess, as a result of making this partnership with KW. You got a bit more time to dedicate to the design and I guess the racing and testing part of things as well. What do you think is next? I think the one thing that I don't think I've seen in your collection of products yet has been a wheel with a screen. Is that something that you think, especially with VR becoming more and more prevalent, is still something that has a future, or do you not think that it's necessarily worth the amount of time to develop that process?
That's a really difficult question, I have to say. There is definitely a reason to have wheels with display. But I can tell you my to-do list is really, really long, and I cannot disclose any secrets. And I think I think if you follow my social media, you are that's the best point to get information about any new products.
Speaking of wheels with screens, though, I'm guessing I'm not the only one that basically just used to like duct tape an old phone to the steering wheel, right? Like, that's what I used to do. Just load up JRT and then just like run it in the browser on the phone and just like have the dashboard that way. I thought that was pretty cool at the time, but now I realize it's kind of like not the most ideal situation. Looks kind of tacky. So I'm hoping that that the wheels with actual displays are developed, and so our setups can look a little bit nicer, I suppose.
Yeah, but as you mentioned, so it's a really difficult question because is there really a need for the wheel display or not? If you are racing virtual reality, there's definitely no need for it. And is there a market for it when the price is obviously higher for these wheels? And the third point is if your sim racing setup is correct, then you most likely see the virtual wheel on your screen anyways. So it's a really, really difficult decision to make if you want to make the great investment for such a wheel.
It's quite a weird one because obviously, you know, if you're running single screen, you're gonna to get like a realistic FOV, you always have to reduce the FOV by quite a bit. So sometimes you cannot see the dashboard. But then again, if you're spending so much money on buying a wheel that has a screen built in, you're probably already have at least triple screens. So it's kind of like, and you could probably get the FOV out enough to be able to see the dash in game. So it's kind of a weird one, isn't it?
Yeah, and another point is actually, for example, if you want to have a SimuCube wireless wheel, it has a battery inside, so you're really limited in regards of displays. So there are things to solve it for sure, but we will see what the future will bring.
Well, I actually have a question for you, Martin, because we have been seeing a lot of these screens. I'm trying to think of all the different products. I've been seeing a number of standalone dashes, an increasing number of wheels with the screen itself included. Is it a technical challenge? Because I'm sure there's a lot of work that goes in there. You talk about on the wireless wheels, for example, not having the battery capacity to power those type of screens. In terms of designing these sim racing wheels, how much of it is a technical compromise over, you know, designing what you want versus what's technically possible versus adapting it for the price point and the ergonomics as a racer that you ultimately want?
Yeah, most, if not anything, is possible. So as you mentioned, you have to make a compromise. Is it worth the additional development and product costs? And yeah, it's always some kind of compromise that you have to make as an engineer. It's the whole world is a compromise in the end. But regarding my developments, I try to find some kind of sweet spot where it's not a $50 plastic wheel, but it's not a $5,000 custom wheel. So I think there is an increasing market for higher end priced products to get more realism out of it. But you always have to find the best, and we will see.
Oh, we will see indeed, and I think that's a good time then for maybe us to wrap up here. Martin, before we let you go, you mentioned social media. Like I said at the start of the show, I've had a very difficult time finding your social media. Why don't you give the company's social media, and indeed anyone else, a plug here, just so that they can follow along with the development of new products, and indeed follow along with stock updates as well as they come along.
Yeah, check out Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube for Ascher Racing, and we just launched all the social media channels, and they are constantly updated with new stuff, and I think it's worth subscribing.
Well, thanks for joining us, Martin, then, and good luck for the rest of the year. And I know there's at least one more DNLS race that you might be able to compete in, so good luck with that one.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. See you.
So that was Martin Ascher then, and that's it for another episode of Talking Tents. Before we go, though, Connery, I do want to get your thoughts. We've got one more episode to go before the end of the year. I think we should have some kind of a recap episode, but I don't want to just talk to the winners of, this year's World Championship. I think we should try and do something a bit more interesting. Maybe we should try and get our very own Hugo Luis to come on the episode.
Yes. Yes, I approve. I mean, he's gotten a new microphone, so to do some of the Portuguese commentary on iRacing, Brazilian Portuguese commentary. So there's no reason why he can't actually join us on the podcast now. It'd be great to get some insight from a driver that has won a World Championship with just a 327. So there we go. So none of this fancy direct drive or Huizenveld pedals stuff. He did that whole old thing that that old stereotypical granddad thing where it's just like I walked to school and back both ways uphill and things like that. I get the feeling that's what Hugo's going to be like.
Well, I tell you what, we've thrown down the challenge and we'll see if that happens then. But let's wrap it up then for another episode of Talking Tents, and let's preview another great weekend of racing action, all live on RaceSpotTV. In just a few hours' time, you can catch 60-plus racing adventures as they wrap up another great season from Watkins Glen. Catch Paul Smith and David Haynes on the call for that one. This Friday, you can catch the end of two more championships. The Pro Mazdas finish up their season also at Watkins Glen alongside Friday Night Primetime, and the IMSA Sports Car Championship from the Imola circuit. Nolan Rempel and Ryan Walker will be on the call for that one. Busy day on Saturday, and it kicks off with BMW Munich and their finale. You can join Connery Maddock, Paul Smith, and myself will all be part of the broadcast team for that one, as well as the Rallycross World Championship season finale from Sonoma, as well as the Majors season finale from the Nürburgring. Sunday then, it's the Ivor GT Sprint Series rounds number 5 and 6 from Daytona, alongside round number 3 of the Porsche Esports Carrera Cup Denmark. Busy weekend then for us, and time to say goodbye. For myself, Arjuna Kankipati, I've been joined by Connery Maddock and Hugo Luis, and we'll see you in 2 weeks' time.